It's Tuesday, August 19th. This is What's Up Today, your quick, clear tour of the world in the past 48 hours. We'll start in Washington, move to Gaza, then Pakistan, the Korean Peninsula, the Atlantic, and Africa's conflict belt. Let's dive in. Washington's high-stakes Ukraine diplomacy. All eyes were on the White House as U.S. President Donald Trump hosted Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky, with European leaders joining later for a wider set of talks. The headline: Washington is now openly trying to broker direct talks between Zelensky and Vladimir Putin, with Trump saying he's working to arrange a meeting of the two leaders. The specifics are still being kept under wraps, but the aim is to map a path toward a ceasefire and a broader security framework for Ukraine. European leaders publicly stressed that Europe must stay at the table and that any deal should avoid forcing territorial concessions on Kyiv. No ceasefire yet, but this is the closest the parties have come in months to a structure for formal negotiations. Gaza. Acceptance of a ceasefire framework. Waiting for Israel's answer. In parallel, there's movement in the Gaza war. Hamas has accepted a 60-day ceasefire proposal brokered by Egypt and Qatar with U.S. backing. The draft includes hostage prisoner exchanges and a surge in humanitarian access. Israel has received the proposal. As of now, no formal acceptance has been announced, and ground operations have continued in parts of Gaza City. Even if the pause goes ahead, the humanitarian situation remains severe, with tens of thousands of deaths reported over nearly 2 years of war and widespread hunger. The next decisive step is Israel's response, and whether mediators can close the last-mile gaps on sequencing and guarantees. Pakistan's flash flood catastrophe. Northern Pakistan is living through a disaster. Rare, intense cloudbursts and monsoon downpours triggered landslides and flash floods that have killed more than 340 people since Friday, most of them in Buner district, with entire neighborhoods swept away. Rescue crews report roads choked with mud and debris, and more rain is forecast in the coming days. Authorities warn the death toll could rise as remote valleys become reachable and as fresh storms develop into early September. The tragedy underscores how climate-intensified extremes are hitting the Hindu Kush foothills. Steep terrain, dense settlements, and limited drainage create lethal conditions when the sky opens. Korean Peninsula. Drills and hard talk. In East Asia, Ulchi Freedom Shield, the annual U.S.-South Korea exercises, kicked off this week. North Korea's Kim Jong-un responded with familiar but sharper rhetoric, ordering a faster nuclear and naval buildup while inspecting his most advanced destroyer. Seoul and Washington emphasize the drills are defensive and multi-domain, built around scenarios that include cyber threats and missile attacks. The bottom line? The exercise keeps Allied readiness high, but it also keeps tensions elevated, with Pyongyang telegraphing more tests and deployments to come. Atlantic watch. Hurricane Erin flexes offshore. Out over the water, Hurricane Erin roared into a Category 4 storm after briefly touching Category 5 strength over the weekend. The eye is staying offshore, but Erin's huge wind field is kicking up dangerous surf and rip currents from the Caribbean to the U.S. East Coast, with eyes now on a possible brush past Atlantic Canada later this week. Forecast models keep the center away from the U.S. mainland, yet local authorities warn that you don't need a landfall to have life-threatening seas. If you're near the coast, heed the flags and the lifeguards. Africa's conflict belt. Stalled talks and military reshuffles. 2 stories to watch in Africa. First, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, government negotiators and the M23 rebel group missed an August 18th deadline to convert their principles declaration into a concrete peace deal at talks in Doha. Fighting has recently escalated in the east, and while both sides say they'll keep talking, progress is fragile and reversible. Second, in Sudan, Army Chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan reshuffled senior commands, tightening control over allied militias and formal army structures as the war with the RSF grinds on. Diplomats will be watching whether this consolidation leads to new offensives or creates space for mediation. Why these stories matter? Right now, the Washington track on Ukraine doesn't end the war, but it restitches the negotiating table. US, Ukraine, Russia, and crucially, Europe in an explicit role. That matters for any security guarantees, sanctions, sequencing, and reconstruction pledges that follow. If even a temporary ceasefire emerges from this choreography, supply lines, markets, and refugee flows across Europe will feel it fast. In Gaza, Hamas's stated acceptance of a 60-day pause is the first practical step in weeks. The sticking points are familiar: hostage lists, prisoner ratios, the pace of Israeli withdrawals, and enforcement. But if Israel signs on, a sustained pause could unlock medical evacuations, stabilize aid corridors, and lower the risk of regional spillover. The humanitarian stakes are enormous. Pakistan's floods are the latest reminder that catastrophe can arrive in a single hour of rain when the atmosphere is supercharged. The science is clear. Warmer air holds more moisture, and when that moisture dumps over steep valleys, the outcome is flash flooding with no time to run. The emergency phase will give way to months of recovery. The clock for the next storm is already ticking. On the Korean Peninsula, military routines and political signaling are tightly linked. Each Ulchi rotation tests allied logistics and command, and each reaction from Pyongyang tests crisis management channels. A misread of a drill or a test can escalate quickly. That's why transparency and hotlines matter. Erin's track is a textbook case of offshore doesn't mean safe. The storm's swell and long-period waves are energy moving outward. They can turn a calm beach deadly with rip currents in minutes. Follow local advisories if you're anywhere along the Atlantic Rim this week. What to watch next, the next 24-48 hours. First, whether Washington's momentum produces a date and venue for a Zelensky-Putin meeting, and whether Europeans secure a formal seat in that format. Second, Israel's reply to the Gaza 60-day pause proposal. If a yes comes quickly, expect an intense diplomatic sprint to sequence releases and aid. Third, Pakistan's weather window. Authorities are bracing for additional rain bursts. Any new cloudburst over saturated ground could trigger further slides. Fourth, Erin's turn to the north. Keep an eye on marine advisories from the National Hurricane Center. Finally, in Africa, any sign that Doha talks in the DRC are back on track, or that Sudan's reshuffle foreshadows a shift on the battlefield. That's your world in under 10 minutes. If this roundup helped you make sense of a noisy news day, tap subscribe and share what's up today with a friend. I'm your name. See you tomorrow.